the culture of the team is what determines whether an innovation team will succeed or not. The culture of the team has to be humility, which is what you're describing, right? The culture of the team has to be that we try stuff, but we're not arrogant to think that just because it came from us, it's going to be successful. We kind of, in innovation, you have to build and test all the time, and keep taking punches to the gut and falling to the ground and just coming back up. That's just the nature of the work. So we need teams that have a culture of sort of that humble inquiry. That's the word, yeah. So this humble inquiry, this kind of humble intellect, and you can build that into the culture, and then maybe you start looking for people that are a fit for that culture, even if they may be different in terms of their personality spectrums, right?
This episode of Search with Purpose wouldn't be possible without my day job at Exige International. Exige is an executive search firm providing talent within the Western European market for a whole range of financial services organizations. We, as a group of executives at Exige, believe that recruitment can be done differently. It can be done in a way which serves the needs of both our clients and our candidates, and also the world in which we live. We've committed to not only finding the very best talent available in the world, but also to giving 10% of our search revenue to forest protection charities to ensure that the future generations have these treasures intact and can enjoy them just as we have. So if you'd like to find out more about our work here at Exige, then please do check out our website at exigeinternational.com. That's EXIGE international.com. Or of course you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'll be very happy to have a conversation. This episode with Tendayi Viki is one I've been looking forward to. He comes highly recommended for anyone interested in the subject of innovation. As a partner at Strategyzer, he runs many innovation and creativity-based workshops inside organizations, and that thinking that he's done on the subject I found to be very refreshing and illuminating, and I suppose in some ways a confirmation of many of the thoughts that I had around themes like humility, trust, resilience, and failure in that process. I learned a lot about the role of leaders and how leaders facilitate these innovation workshops and what we should be thinking about, and how we can maybe impact both positively and negative those processes. He also has a book out called Pirates in the Navy. The book is written for those who are passionate innovators, but they're working inside large organizations and they want to create innovation ecosystems and bring that to life. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. It takes a little bit of time for us to get warmed up, but once we're there, we really can dive into some very interesting and helpful and informative topics. So without further ado, I give you Tendayi Viki. Enjoy. Welcome to today's episode. I'm with Tendayi Viki. It's a great pleasure to be speaking with you today. Tendayi, you've had a really interesting journey to innovation, and frankly, I'm sort of interested to know what you've been in academia. You've written a few books. You're working in sector. You're writing about innovation with Forbes. You're living, eating, breathing innovation. I wonder how and why you came to this. So, why don't you tell us a bit about your story and why innovation is where you've decided to spend your life?
Yeah, it's you know what they say, right? It's better to be lucky than smart. so I mean, a lot of people are often asking how you make career choices, and it's really just stumbling into opportunities every now and again. So I started my life intending to be a career academic. I wanted to go to law school. I didn't get the grades, so I ended up studying psychology at university. Ended up doing a PhD in psychology and being a psychology professor for 12 years, teaching psychology at university. And it was during that time that I got a fellowship to be a research fellow at Stanford University in Palo Alto. And that was the life-changing moment. That was the moment when getting to Palo Alto, seeing what's happening there with technology, startups, innovation. And that just sort of piqued my interest, and I ended up spending more time in startup incubators than I did in the School of Psychology. So coming back from there, I don't think I ever read another psychology book after that. I think I just read like business books, innovation books. And then so from there, I decided that I was going to do an MBA and sort of slowly make the transition into business with innovation and creativity as the topic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I find that innovation is a topic that I'm greatly interested in myself, professionally and personally. And it is inherently quite an elusive state, how to be creative, how to make something happen. And you had spoken about this actually on a piece I'd listened to you about linear versus non-linear development. So I sort of like to sort of just segue there for a moment, talking about the process of creativity. And, is it something that you can just, lay a linear process down on, or is it going to be something that's inherently messy, and is that okay? So let's talk to us a bit about the sort of the creative process and linear versus non-linear.
So that's interesting, right? So a linear process is when you know exactly what's going to happen. You put $2 in, you get $3 on the other side. 1 + 1 = 2, right? 2 + 2 = 4. So you can kind of, exactly what's going to happen. With creativity, the outputs are unpredictable. The quality of the output is unpredictable. Whether the output is going to have impact is unpredictable. So what you have to do with creative outputs is the philosophy that's been known to work is that you produce more than what you need. So the creative process is about, if you're recording an album, you record 55 songs and then you use 12. That's like that's the creative process. So in a really wonderful book by Adam Grant called Originals. Actually, before I get to the Adam Grant thing, I just want to say something that's sort of bothering me and it's sort of spinning in my head. Because a process is inherently messy, doesn't mean that there are no best practices and management tools you can use to drive it. It's not a black box. So we know the things that drive creativity from a personality standpoint. We know things that drive creativity from a team composition standpoint. We know things that drive creativity from a just a general practice standpoint. So we know that people that are more open to new experiences, for example, are more creative than people that are not, just in terms of personality types. We know that people that have traveled and have been exposed to multiple cultures are more creative than people that are not. I even published a paper where I showed, when I was doing my psychology research, that mixed race people are more creative than single race people. And so it's sort of it's the more and the process that happens is something that we call integrative complexity, the ability to take two things that seem to be in opposition to each other and make them work together. That's where most breakthroughs happen, right? And so you can create teams that are multicultural, cross-functional, right? And create a culture of help seeking and help giving to sort of drive that messy process, right? So that's the one part. And then as you're doing that, we know that the management practice is not to try and pick the winning idea on day one, kind of like somebody putting you in studio and going, write me a hit song. Like that's not how it works, right? The process to get to a hit song is you write 20 bad ones. And in between there, somewhere in that mess, there is the one gem. And really great examples from the book by Adam Grant. Now to spin back to that one, the book by Adam Grant called Originals is like Shakespeare probably wrote 150 plays. We only know 10. Beethoven wrote 500 pieces. We probably only know 12. And so the creative process is you mass produce, and then you choose the winning ideas. After that, they percolate. You can't deliberately design them.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a few strings here I'm interested in, and to follow, and it was good. One of the points that come to you a bit later on, and about the sort of the inherent types of personalities that we seek for in creativity, and are there a certain set of personalities that are at heart more creative, and then, but also I'm interested in the point you talked about with sort of people of mixed race being maybe more innovative or being able to be more creative. So I'm interested in why that is. What was the fight? Why did that come from?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not really that, right? So it's got nothing to do with being mixed race or not. It's got to do with it's got to do, because I don't want people to walk away going, I'm mixed race, I'm more, let's make more mixed race people to make a better world. That's not what I want. That's not the takeaway from here, right? The takeaway is that the more things you're exposed to and your ability to integrate and make sense of those things, the more you are able to become more creative. So a really great group of researchers, I think his name is William Maddox. He's based out of the US. He did work on just like people that are well-traveled, or people that are well-traveled are not as creative as people that have lived within the culture. So people that have actually lived in the culture, lived in a country, they're much more creative than people that have just traveled to that country on a tourist sort of. But the more you've embedded a culture, lived in it, seen the contradictions between that culture and your culture, those people are much more likely to be, to be creative, which then expands to teams, right? The more diverse the team is in terms of perspectives. So it can literally be anything. Like it can literally be, I used to be a carpenter and now I'm an accountant, or I used to be a radio DJ, but I've also got this interest in motor racing. Like the more expansive and sort of diverse the things that are in your mind, that playing around in your mind, the more interesting the things you generate. That's why, like long ago, knowledge was tended to be moved forward by polymaths rather than single discipline folk. Right? Most of the great intellectuals usually had more than one interest.
Yeah. Have you reflected on your own background that you grew up in Zimbabwe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lived in the UK, you've lived in the US,
mm-hmm.
You've worked all over the world. So I was sort of thinking that is that, do you think that's in some way that also will kind of spurred your own interest in innovation, and wondering sort of if in all of that, have you seen anything that actually in a culture is a standout reason or identify for innovation and what it is? Is there a certain value that you've seen across all of those cultures that you've worked in?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I also speak 2 languages that are an expression of 2 different cultures, but I don't know. I can't really speak to that, right, to myself, because I can't see it in myself. It's kind of hard to sort of see yourself, right? It's other people that would have to see it in me. But what you do realize is that, like, the more things you're exposed to, the more expansive your mind is. And then the more things you have to pull at. So like one of the processes, for example, that I think IDEO uses when they're trying to get teams to be more innovative is to say, okay, listen, we're trying to solve this problem, pick a random problem. We're trying to solve the problem of how to make this mouse much more usable. So what we're going to do is we're not going to just focus on the mouse. Bring anything from your life that you find interesting. And then people bring like their favorite Nike shoes. They show you their favorite website. They bring a magazine article that they read. They just bring all that stuff into the ideation workshop. Things that are all oftentimes, and they just share, right? And then they try and make the connections within. They're like, oh, I wonder what the principle for designing that could work for. So it's really just about pulling at various things, and that's a process for sparking creativity.
Yeah, that's very interesting actually, because I'm currently deep in a book called The Artist's Way by a lady called Julia Cameron. I mean, some people may know this book. I don't know if you're sure. She works specifically with people trying to become more creative, or with artists trying to unblock themselves. And, she has this premise early on in the book that everybody can be creative. There is no specific type of person who is going to be more creative than somebody else. There is an artist that sort of lives in all of us. And, she brings a very similar method, actually. She has this idea of kind of morning journal, morning pages, where you sort of just write and get all of the chatter that's in your mind out onto the page. And there's another part where she asks you to go on a date with yourself, the artist date, which is about, I think, to what you said there about just getting creative, just pulling on different strings and finding connectivity between random situations and the problems that you're trying to create for. But what I see in that is that she's also applying a system to inherently a creative function. It's this idea of like the control system and the creative system, and that the ultimate productivity in innovation happens somewhere in between, right? And so I'm glad to hear that, there is a science that you can apply, but there is also, an inherently
free and artistic component that we have to be able to express. And I wonder, when I work with organizations, I'm a great believer in teams succeeding based on trust, right? And I wonder what you think about the qualities or the environments that you need to create in big organizations to create the right environments for them to be innovative. What are your thoughts on either trust as a quality or any of the kind of conditions that need to be created inside big companies to innovate?
Yeah, so trust is an interesting one, right? Because there's a couple of things in that, right? So if we're working in a team together, I trust that you're authentically interested in things that work. I trust that if I bring something that's kind of crazy, we will get a chance to test it out as a team, and if it fails, it doesn't matter. Which is different from the expectation is that you're going to deliver Q4 numbers come rain or shine. Great. So an execution engine just will not create the right psychologically safe space for innovation. Innovation is literally, we're going to make a mess, and then after we've made the mess, we're going to systematically test it to see which of those threads we've pulled don't have value. And so you have to trust two things. The first thing is you have to trust that we can make a mess, and then you have to trust that we'll clean up the mess through a process of iteration and testing. If while you're cleaning up the mess, you're already trying to select, you will start to constrain the process. And so what companies need is management systems or management processes or management styles or working environments that facilitate mess making and iterative development and testing. So we say design like you're right and test like you're wrong. Those are the two principles. Design like you're right and then test like you're wrong. That's the best way to extract innovations out of teams. If you don't create that environment for teams, the trust will go away, because when I'm making a mess and you're critiquing everything that I'm doing, you're making me start to refine my ideas too soon. And by making me refine my ideas too soon, I'm less likely to find that breakthrough thing that's going to create value, right? So as managers, you have to sort of trust your teams to make the mess. Now, as an innovation team, you build trust in your manager to the extent that after you've made a mess, you're also disciplined about then pulling on threads that create value and testing your ideas and making sure you find something solid. So it's a kind of a two-way street of how you build trust with innovation, right? That's the way to work it out, I think.
Yeah, trust is a very can be a very fragile state, but once it's embedded, I see it in the teams that I work with, and when teams are failing, that really is because that trust has broken down fundamentally.
Yeah,
I wonder, talking about failure, and what your thoughts are on failure in sort of in the context of innovation, and do you think that you talk about in your book as well, the Pirates in the Navy, that you talk about these privateers, right? Describe privateers, and they are that mix between the sort of the pirate and the corporate animal, somebody who can sit in between that, right? And so I want to link that sort of the idea of like failure, because if you're going to be a privateer or you're going to be a pirate or you're going to be anything inside an organization that has to do with innovation, you are going to be failing at some point, right? You're going to be failing probably pretty spectacularly more than you are going to be succeeding. And so we've talked about trust.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and make a mess. Trust, then you can clean it up. But is it also trust then around failure? About failure is going to be that, yes, you can fail. I can fail spectacularly, but I can trust you that you're going to support me when I do. And we're going to be able to get enough failure to get to success. So, what are your thoughts on failure and in the context of big organizations?
Yeah, I mean, so there's two things, right? You can't fail in a manner that it damages the main business. So that's the first building block of that trust, which is innovators are in a sandbox where the blast radius is contained, so that they're not failing in a way that puts the organization at risk. That's fundamentally critical. The second thing is, when we're making a mess, we're making small bets. We're not making big bets. which means that we're happy to accept failure because failure is cheap and failure is fast. And so we make small bets, we make multiple small bets, and then we only double down our investment on those things that are showing promise. And so again, that's another way of limiting the blast radius of failure. And so the more and more you can limit the blast radius of failure, the more and more you can build trust. Because then leaders are like, yeah, it's fine. Like, I mean, if I give you like $50,000 and it doesn't work out, okay. But if I give you $3 million, now it's my reputation and yours on the line. So it better work. So the question is just like they do in venture capital, right? If you're just starting out, nobody's going to give you like $20 million to work on a project. They'll give you seed funding, 15 grand. Go prove some things. And as you come back with evidence that you're making progress, we'll give you more. And that's really the management process for driving innovation, which is different from how we drive the core business.
Okay, and so this seems like a nice one. I'm going to follow this track for a while now on the sort of the qualities of people in these teams as well. You know, if we've got somebody listening to this who, you know, say is an accountant and, you know, they're in maybe an audit function and they're like, you know, I really want to create something. I really want to start getting innovative, but I just don't think I'm that type of person. Or we may be listening to somebody in a sales role who may think of themselves as being a little bit more, you know, sort of, you know, big sky thinking, big blue sky thinking. Do you think there are, I mean, I personally think of these individuals, so we've got two very people on different sides, thinkers and feelers, right? You know, and then I think of a quality in the people I'm always looking for, which is humility. Humility, I think, is one of these qualities I've seen. It's a fundamental pillar I look for in anyone I'm hiring.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that if you find somebody with high levels of humility, it's a great indicator of basically how they'll go on to work in organizations, how creative also they will be. And so I wonder what you think about humility specifically also as a quality, no matter where you are on the psychometric spectrum, as being important or not to innovation.
Yeah. So I mean, so when it comes to describing like human beings is how good they are at innovation, I get stuck because it's teams that innovate, not people. So the idea that innovation is like tennis, like a solo sport, right? So when I get that question, that's the first thing I push back on, which is
okay.
Right, individuals don't innovate, teams innovate. There's never like when people say Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. Thomas Edison is a name for 15 other people.
Yeah.
That were there running the experiments, doing the tests, saying, "Hey, try this one," or "Let's try this." It was a lab. So that's the first piece. Which means that in that mix, what you need are thinkers and feelers. What you need are the people that go, okay, enough of the creative stuff, let's do something. And people that say, no, don't keep pushing us, allow us to do this. You need that mix of different personality types and different skill sets and different pieces of knowledge and different threads pulling together. It's a philosophy that I call, sometimes when we talk about team diversity, we talk about professional diversity, but we don't talk about psychological diversity. Right? So you need that psychological diversity in the team. Now, in the culture of the team is what determines whether an innovation team will succeed or not. The culture of the team has to be humility, which is what you're describing, right? The culture of the team has to be that we try stuff, but we're not arrogant to think that just because it came from us is going to be successful. We kind of, in innovation, you have to build and test all the time and keep taking punches to the gut and falling to the ground and just coming back up. That's just the nature of the work. So we need teams that have a culture of sort of that humble inquiry. That's the word, yeah. So this humble inquiry, this kind of humble intellect, and you can build that into the culture. And then maybe you start looking for people that are a fit for that culture, even if they may be different in terms of their personality spectrums, right?
Yeah. I feel that, actually. I think it was a word coming up a lot here, which is diversity and diversity of thinking, professional diversity. And it's been a thought of mine for a while that that we all, when I'm advising that someone searches out for, a co-founder in a startup, or they're looking for, someone to build into their leadership team, that I'm advising that we identify for cognitive diversity.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something beautiful in the fact that you have people who come at problems from a different angle.
Yeah.
Be that if you're male or female, white, Asian, anywhere in between, if you are gay, straight, if you come from a low-income family originally, if you come from a rich family, it's just a new way to look at the world, right? Which I think that, and that's a difficult thing to build sometimes into organizations. And I wonder actually, when you create innovation teams, if that's something that you need to be very particular about. Is that something you should be, when you're creating those teams and inside organizations, that you should be going, okay, we need somebody who's on that psychometric side, that side, or that side, or do you just do it haphazardly? I mean, what is your idea on that? Because you do this so much with companies, helping them create these innovation units. So this diversity of thinking, is that a deliberate process when you come to creating innovation teams?
Yeah, so I found that organizations focus a lot on demographic diversity, and then it becomes the place where they hide the fact that they're all alike. I was watching a program it's a very great BBC program on the role of the upper classes in the UK in terms of how they drive the entertainment media business, I think. And what you find is there's a lot of racial diversity, for example, on the BBC, but the guy went to private school, so he's not anything like any of the other people that are from the. So do you see what I'm saying? So for me, when I'm working with teams, like for example, I was working with a team in a large manufacturing company, and we were in Dubai, and we did their psychological profiles, and they were a diverse group. It was a mixture of males, females, black, white, Asian. Dubai, the way Dubai is, right? Mm-hmm. It's like a melting pot. But when we looked at their profiles, they were all like, because of an engineering firm, they were all heavy on thinking and no feeling. So it didn't matter that they all came from different cultures, that they were all like the style of thinking that they'd recruited for was the same, but they would be proud that they're diverse. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to the kind of work we're doing right now, I say let's focus less on almost like the demographic diversity of a group, and think about really the cognitive diversity, which is what you're talking about, which is different styles of thinking, different ways of approaching a problem, and I think you're much more likely to,
Yeah, that's a tough one though, isn't it? I mean, I think that's where, again, I can imagine with these innovation teams, it's difficult because you need to sort of somehow select, from across an organization. And pull them in, and recognizing that you need this sort of tension in states, actually. Yeah. I would like to talk about tension actually in the creative process, because it's maybe something that doesn't get talked about enough, actually, that inherently when you kind of you think of an innovation day, it's like, hey, let's all get together, let's hold hands, let's make best friends, and let's do that. But innovation, which is can be, also described as creation, can be very difficult, very tense, right? So when you are doing innovation, what do you think about that when you see that tension? Do you think that's a good thing, a bad thing? Talk to me about that.
No, absolutely. So there's two principles that work, and Jeff Bezos is really great at really explaining these two principles. The one principle is you need a psychologically safe space to disagree violently on everything. And people understand that it's not personal. We're just working here. We're trying to figure out a goal. And then you need what we call, it's the principle of disagree, then commit. When the team then chooses a direction, you don't then want to be the jerk that says, because they didn't choose my direction, I'm not going to be a saboteur and not join in to make sure that the direction that's chosen actually succeeds. And so this principle of disagree, then commit, that's what creates trust, which is, I know that we're disagreeing, but I know that once we pick a direction, even though it wasn't the direction you suggested, you're all in. Right? And that's what really builds this sort of stuff. Then it becomes, and then it's okay. Like, we can argue for 2 hours. And we say, okay, what are we going to start with? Okay, who's the product manager for this? They make the final decision. Okay, I've heard everything. Let's go this way. And then everyone's like, okay, let's go. But with the view that that direction which we've chosen, it might not work out. And we've got all these other options that we've thought about. So, and we'll come back to those. Yeah.
Violent disagreement. I think that's within a safe space. It's an interesting terminology. I like that.
Yeah.
I think coming back to the earlier point we made about trust and humility, that's why those property values are so incredibly important when we are ultimately getting into situations where we are going to be disagreeing, where we are going to be killing babies effectively, when people are coming up with these precious ideas, and at some point someone's got to go, no, that's a terrible idea. Now let's cut part of that away, and your bit that you just spent 2 weeks designing, actually we can't deliver that.
Yeah.
There's going to be some violence in that disagreement, and that will be, I suppose, ultimately predicated on the trust that you've developed before, whether or not you can actually go ahead and successful team, right?
But it's also the fairness of those decisions, right? Which is, how do we make decisions? How was it decided that the thing I worked on for 2 weeks is not worth working on anymore? Was it because we put it in front of customers and customers didn't like it? Right? What is the fairness of the decision making? The fairness of the decision making is what creates trust. So you need people that are humble enough to say, ideas are a dime a dozen. We'll put them in the mix, but there's a process for extracting what works that doesn't work, and that process is fair.
Okay, this seems like a nice way to talk a bit about what the work that you do with Strategyzer and how that connects to agile and lean startup, because there may be some people listening to this who have lived under a rock somewhere and have no idea what Strategyzer is. Because, if they can see you on camera, you've got those, it's, synonymous with these amazing sort of rolled out paper with sort of boxes where you can design, different, but maybe you could just tell us a bit about these systems that make it more fair, right? Apply the science to this creative mess that is innovation.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? So science might be too heavy a word. I like to go to like frameworks and tools.
Well, you can call it whatever you like, right? You can put on a lab coat, or you can just.
I like it. Like there might be some PhD physics major somewhere going, what the hell? So we call it framework and tools. And so the thing that makes Strategyzer really, really sort of world class, in my opinion, I've been working with them for 18 months now.
I love Strategyzer, by the way. We use it a lot ourselves. So yeah, everybody's got to love it. If you get to try it, please do. Anybody, but please,
Thank you. Really appreciate that. So the thing that makes it world class is that Alex has figured out a way of designing visual tools that allow for collaboration. Right. And so if you have visual tools that allow for collaboration, it means that people can gather together. They can have a shared language, a shared definition of what a business model is, a shared definition of what a value proposition is, and then they can use those things to guide conversation. So that when they're engaged in the creative process, they mean the same thing. When they say what's a customer segment, it means the same thing, and it means something different from a value proposition. It means something different from a channel. It means something different from a customer relationship. And so that way of like collaborating together is really great. And then the second thing is that because the tools are visual and flexible, you can also like design. They've got this built-in flexibility that allows you to do multiple things with them. That allows you to map out very, very, very different ideas and kind of stitch those out. And then together with the lean startup movement or the lean startup approach, if you wrap all those things together, you can actually develop a designing and testing process. So the fairness is when we're designing our business models, we design them, we say this is the idea we want to work on. It looks very good. We get it really creative. We come up with various ideas. We stretch it as much as we can. And when we're done with that, we say, okay, we're done with design. We're now shifting to the testing phase. And in the testing phase, we ask ourselves one basic question, which is, we've designed a really great idea here. But what are all the things that would have to be true in the real world for this idea to work? Like, what would have to be true in the real world? Well, it would have to be true that customers have the need that we think they have. It would have to be true that customers are willing to pay $5.99 to subscribe. It would have to be true that we can create the product. It would have to be true that we can easily get our application hosted on Apple Store. Like, so you map out all the things that have to be true, and then you ask yourself a second question: well, how much evidence do we have right now that those things are true? And then that's the review process. Say, okay, we have evidence, this one we don't. This we have evidence, this one we don't. Okay, well, for those things that we don't have evidence for, let's start testing those things. And if the data comes back and tells us that the things that needed to be true for our idea to be successful are not true, we stop.
Okay, so if I'm right there, then sort of we effectively have sort of two distinct phases with this visual approach. We talked earlier about, diversity, cognitive diversity, diversity of thinking. This visual approach of the systems allows those who have different ways of thinking to participate in a process of innovation on a level playing field, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That hadn't come to my mind before, but it makes a lot of sense because in my own team, I have thinkers and feelers, and I'm the talker. I like to kind of, think big. My colleagues say it's like trying to lasso clouds with me. And then I have those who are, I know, right? It's a great way to put it. And then we have those who are much more in the numbers, who are the thinkers, don't like to be hugged. There's those people. And now thinking about this system, that visual approach that Strategyzer gives you is that common way, a common language to think diversely in a common way. I really like that. I think for people listening who haven't used it, there'll be a great starting point. And then you move into the testing phase, which is, I suppose, ultimately about being fair, right? As we've spoken about as well. This that you can find the data, and if then you figure that actually something's wrong or something's not right, or that you just need to change something, then you can do it based on a fair approach.
Exactly. Yeah. Based on evidence, right? It's the evidence that drives the decision making, rather than the highest paid person's opinion, or in your case, the owner's opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm aware of that dynamic in the creative process for sure, and I think it's something that needs to be vaccinated against very regularly, actually, because I think that's where it comes back to humility, and I think Ray Dalio talked about this, that there are some different personalities that you get, and some are very comfortable articulating themselves verbally, and others are much more reflective. And that is something I found certainly in a creative process I need to be mindful of, is giving everybody a voice at the table, right? That's the idea of humility, of trust, that people can stand forward. So when you're doing this, and you go and help companies, Tendayi, do you do this? Are you sort of the referee? Are you sort of the sort of omnipotent God that sort of lays down the rules and how to do it? How do you facilitate this?
Yeah, so my philosophy of consulting with companies is, by the time I leave, you should be able to do it yourselves, right? It shouldn't be that you keep phoning me going, hey, we're doing another design session, come and facilitate. We're doing another design session, come and facilitate, right? So that's why our goal is to proliferate the toolbox. And the toolbox has to be easy to use. It also has to be easy to learn to use. And so, my role is coach, right? I don't actually get to play the game, but the company gets to play the game. And in fact, my role is tennis coach. Like tennis coaches are not allowed to coach during the game. Like they have to sit on the sideline. Like I'm like a tennis coach. I have to coach before, and then I go on my way, and people only call me if they need something. And so that's the role we play as a Strategyzer.
Yeah, I think that's you said two words there, coach and game, and I'm interested to sort of follow that a little bit, if I may, because this idea of games, there's a chap I'm going to be doing another interview called Luke Homan, based out in, I think he's a mutual colleague, a mutual friend of ours, in fact.
Yeah.
He wrote about innovation games.
Yeah.
Right? And I can't think of something like creativity. You read Julia Cameron's book. She talks a lot about playing, going out and having fun.
Yeah.
The word game. And there is something about watching children play and be creative that is just so incredibly humbling. I could use that word again when I watch my children. It's so deep in it. And you've used that word. So I wonder what it is you think it is about play or games that are so synonymous with innovation. Have you given that any thought?
There's no fear of failure. Right? When you're playing games, when kids are playing, except my son Jacob, who's really competitive, they don't really care if they win or lose that much, right? If they're kind of doing, especially if they're doing random play rather than structured play, They're really just prodding the world to see what happens. And so that's how you do discovery. You sort of prod the world to see what happens. And over time, we socialize that out of each other. We socialize the prodding of the world to see what happens. We say, no, listen, the world has already been prodded. We know what happens. Just walk in this direction, right? And so people start to feel less secure to try new things. And so when you're trying to build an innovation culture, you kind of have to then create the space where you bring that back out of them, which is, in this space is fine. Prod the world, see what happens.
Yeah.
Right? And we've got a sandbox. We've designed it in such a way, just kind of like what you do for your kids. Right? You're not gonna let your kids come play on the motorway, right? Put them in a place where they can play safely. And that's the same thing we do with innovation team. Not to say that innovation teams are children. That's not the implication here, but that the process that they're using is a mess-making process, and so we kind of need to contain the impact that it has on the organization.
You know what? I think we could be more like children at work a bit more, actually. I think there's an interesting one about this idea of, having and playing and being able to access the child mentality.
Yeah.
Because I do think there is a misnomer between the idea that children are, it's a state of being which is somehow inferior. But
right.
what I admire in my children is their utter absorption and concentration. Something. There's the idea and ability to enter a flow state.
Yes,
so incredible to watch. Any of those of you that have children, that you interact with, you just watch them being so deep. And that, I think, actually is where we're trying to access this deep flow concentration state, which allows that creativity to come forth. And then if you can capture them, like you're talking about, in these structured environments that help you then to sort of, then go out and test them in the world and create evidence and keep it fair.
Yeah. So I just want to add one thing to that, which is the role of managers and leaders, right, is to decide when what works. So it's not so the thing that sometimes hurts innovators is we tend to make universal statements about the things that we believe in. So there's a certain class of problem.
What you're talking about there?
Class of problem where you can solve using the children's mindset, if you want to call it that. The job of the ambidextrous leader, if you want to call them that, the leader that can move between different states, is to say, this is a creativity problem. This is an execution challenge. This is a design challenge. This is a testing challenge. And then you start to pull on the toolbox to say, okay, listen, right now we're designing. Let's get our sticky notes together, get Sharpies, bring inspiration. There's the wall. Let's do it. That's our tool for design. Okay, we're now prioritizing. We need a framework for that. So we get a 2x2, important, evidence, no evidence, and now we're designing experiments. So bring out your calculators, folks. Right? So now I don't want you to be a child. Like, we're not joking. Right? I really don't want you to be a child. I really want you to tell me what the minimum success criteria for experiment are. And then when we come back and we're analyzing data from that experiment, I want us to be serious. To say, did the experiment work? Did we get the results we expected? And then we say, no, we didn't get the results we expected. So we're going to have to redesign our product. Cool. Let's get back to play.
Yeah.
Right? What we've just learned. Let's bring back our child mindset. Let's play again and see, if we can create around this new learning. Bring out the sticky notes again. Okay, cool. Let's go back. So you have to be able to dance between those two states, and you have to create a culture that even empowering your teams to actually push back and go, no, you're applying the wrong tool right now. This is a problem that needs to be solved in this way.
I think that's a beautiful, a really fantastic actual lesson there. So when what works, right?
Yeah.
I suppose that's going back to the idea of the coach then, right? It's knowing in which distinct phase of the game that you're in.
Yes.
I'm coaching football, under sevens football.
Oh, cool.
So I'm trying to link this up between, when you have your defensive phase and you have your attacking phase and you have the transition phase in between, and they're different mindsets for the team to be in. And I can sort of see how that works in a game state actually as well. But I can actually see that's very difficult. Because you may get a leader who is, someone who is definitely the creative.
Yes.
And they're going to not want to be in the detail. And I think, again, we'll quote Ray Dalio's book again. He talks about creating baseball cards for people in the organization. He says you want to give, creative tasks to creative thinkers and the detail jobs to the detail people, right? And it sounds like that's where the real artistry comes in here, is being able to know which part of the game you're in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why Scrum. So the best metaphor for innovation is Scrum. Scrum comes from the NFL, where every play is scripted, right? So the quarterback, like every play is like in chunks, and at each point you're making decisions. So if you have to move 10 yards, that's the goal. If you fail to move 10 yards and you've gone back 15 yards, you get together, you scrum, and you go, we're back at 15. What do we do now? And then you go, all right, we need to do this. And then everybody goes and plays, and you come back and you analyze the results. And that's where this concept of Scrum and Agile came from, which is we work, we see the results, we review, then we go back out again. We work, we see the results, review, and then we go back out again, which is different from we set the roadmap in January. Now we're going until December. I don't want anyone to ask me about the roadmap.
Yeah. This would be an interesting for people to go and watch the talk that you did on YouTube about linear and non-linear, and that actually a lot of the design phases seem to go in like, you go into your design phase, you do your testing phase, and you do scaling. I don't know if I did that justice, but effectively what it is that so many organizations like these linear processes, but the fact is that teams can be in different positions in their process, right? Like at the moment, I've got a new product, which is we're piloting it, but we need, further, maybe we need to do more work on iteration around the product design, for example. So you can see, and you don't necessarily need to go out to more customer voice. You may need to be doing more feasibility testing, right? For an example. So you're saying there, what works is the coach's job to be able to figure out where you are. So that's where you bring someone in like yourself and hopefully teach enough people to know then how to make these things work. And that's tricky. That's definitely a tricky thing to do. So, okay, maybe sort of switching gears. We've covered quite a lot of stuff there around sort of the states of, doing this and states of being in innovation and those sorts of things. And maybe people are also listening to this thinking, well, I'm in lockdown at the moment. How am I supposed to be creative with COVID-19 raging, and I can't even get together with people? So I wonder what your thoughts are on, you're still going to innovate. No more time when you need to innovate when stuff is like it is right now, right? What are your thoughts on innovating in this sort of distributed way? Will that affect it negatively, or can it still work just the same?
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of distributed coaching for the last couple of weeks. It's really difficult. Distributed work is really difficult. You have to over prepare. You have to over design. You have to over communicate. And you have to give space and time. It's not the same dynamic as being together. But it doesn't mean that it can't be done. We're not going to just wash our hands and walk away from the field. We do have to innovate. I think the harder thing is not the remote thing. I think the harder thing for people to innovate is to innovate in a crisis. That's really, really hard. And I find that organizations, it's my theory at the moment, and I'm doing research on it, and I want to find out whether this is true. It's almost like by the time you have the heart attack, it's too late to start jogging. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you're now in a crisis. You're now needing to nurse yourself first back to health before you can even start jogging. So my fear is that the companies that didn't do innovation, they didn't have the muscle already. They're finding it the hardest to pivot, iterate, respond to the pressures that they're under right now. And coming out of this crisis, those leaders will be like, "Great, that was fun, virtual working and all that. Now everybody get back to work. we have a crisis to solve."
Yeah.
Right. And then they'll get back to cost cutting, efficiency, and no innovation at all.
I'm glad you're thinking on this, and in my own experience of this, having created a product called Found, which is all about teaching leaders how to hire their dream team, and then being at a launch phase with it, and then having COVID-19 slam down on the market where organizations are being cautious about hiring, made me think, have I got it exactly right?
Yeah,
I'm at that stage I'm already at the stage of immediacy. That fight moment where I've got to start looking after my organization. I've got to actually figure out what's going on in my family. I've got to figure out a whole range of things which are immediacy related issues.
Yeah.
and I presume the brain kicks in a different way. It's more animalistic to be dealing with what's right in front of you.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I don't inherently believe that's a creative state. I think that's more like an execution state, isn't it?
Execution state,
Get
exactly.
stuff done, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what Scott Anthony says is really well, which is innovate before you need to.
Yeah.
Because the need to innovate and the ability to innovate are inversely related. Like when you need to and you're in a crisis,
Yeah.
it's too late. I'm from Zimbabwe. We have a saying which is you can't make your cows fat when you get to the market. Like you need to have been feeding them before you take them to the market. You're gonna say like tomorrow we're gonna market feed them.
Yeah. And you know what though? I will say to this is very true because I've got some of the Strategyzer charts. We actually did a session. We did it over about 3 days, a couple months back, maybe longer, where we did about 4 or 5 different products, lots of sticky notes. We chose one and we rolled up the other ones and we put them back in the cupboard with a view that we will bring them out. And we've done just that actually.
Right.
We brought them out now and we're rethinking some of the product ideas that we had, which didn't seem suitable back then.
Exactly.
I'm very thankful for that process actually, because like you're saying, actually, I think to put my team through this idea of I need to drop things right now and innovating would be very difficult.
Right. Imagine you wanted to do those 5 canvases now.
Yeah. It'd be very
difficult. Like today was the day you said, okay, now we're in a crisis. We don't know what our clients are doing. All these things are going on. Can we just stop for 4 hours and do a canvas? Like, are you crazy? We're not doing that right now. I got this call, I got this email, I got this thing, so absolutely.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Well, I'd like to sort of kind of, I suppose, cycle back round here with, maybe just sort of finishing up. So I would like to just mention the fact that you have written a book right now, right? So you have got a new book out. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. It's coming out tomorrow.
Promotion tomorrow. Okay, fantastic.
Tomorrow. So that's the 14th of May.
Yes. Whenever you're listening to this book will be out 14th of May. What's the name again?
Pirates in the Navy.
Pirates in the Navy. Fantastic. I will be mentioning this a bit. I mean, Pirates in the Navy is all about exactly what we've been talking about, is the idea that you're innovating inside large organizations, right? So
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And I would I'll be putting a link to this in the show notes to the book and so obviously your work. I think it will be a recap of the idea that these privateers versus pirates, and how privateers are succeeding inside large organizations.
Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting topic and something that I'm working on a lot, building teams that are effectively privateers, I suppose. So again, very important topic right now. So please check that out, of course, as well. Look, today I'd like to say thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
If anybody's interested in finding you, how do they find you on the interweb?
on the interweb, yes. So TendayiViki.com or Strategyzer.com.
Okay, brilliant. And you're on LinkedIn as well, right?
I'm on LinkedIn.
All your favorite social networks. Well, I'd like to say thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolute pleasure talking to you and exploring these things. I will hope that anybody who's interested will check out your book and or reach out. But you've been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for your time. And
thank you.